This is Frank. I don't know if you've got that. You do now.
Is this fair?
Hmm?
Is this fair?
Yeah. Hey, Butch. Yeah, have a seat. So, good evening, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. My name is Eric Sanders. People still coming in. Hey, Steve. So we'll do Steve Hutchins, Susan Woods, Kristen Collins, who is the attorney who the city of Belfast has hired to help shepherd us, answer questions through the creation of the plan for withdrawal. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know Dorothy had said she might need to miss some meetings because of cruise or something, so I'm suspecting that's where Dorothy's at. Our last meeting was 2 weeks ago. We skipped last week because of Labor Day, and I think there have been things that have happened since. I'll start with Steve briefly in terms of you attended Belmont's meeting.
On Tuesday, attended Belmont.
And I'm not sure if there's anybody here from Belmont tonight.
Yeah. And they passed the referendum as worded by statute, 12-4, I think. And so that same writing is, I believe, what every other town did, and probably what Swanville's about to do in their revote. It's straight from the statute, you know. And what it says is essentially you're voting to withdraw, and you're going to design an alternate plan. And I think that's the major message that should be brought out to everybody. You have to draw up an alternate plan. The committee that is formed's role by statute now is that you have to draw up an alternate plan. You have to do it ASAP. The state gives you 90 days. Within the drawing up of that plan, it's also going to be negotiated. They call that the agreement with the school board.
Right. And I know Belfast as a committee, including Dorothy, voted to create the plan, and we had extended that offer to the other towns. And I know we had set an artificial deadline of September 4th because our deadline to submit the original plan is October 23rd, because we voted, I think it was June 15th, and then the creation of the committee, you had a month to have your first meeting. So we had our first meeting on July 23rd. So 90 days after that, we need to submit a plan. Come on in. So we met and we determined that we thought it was in Belfast's best interest. We took a couple of meetings to decide that, to invite the former SAD 34 to rejoin as a new RSU, and we extended that out, and there have been meetings since in the various communities. And so at this point, I know there had been some questions about whether the statute indicated withdrawing or studying withdrawal. So Kristen, I'll turn it over to you for some updates on that.
Yep, and it is pretty clear in the statute that when you pass that vote, and the language of the vote's pretty clear itself, that you are being told as a committee to draft up a withdrawal agreement with the plan being to withdraw. That doesn't mean that you are going to withdraw, it just means that an agreement's going to be presented to the voters who ultimately choose whether you withdraw according to that plan. So once you start this process, once the first petition is approved and it goes to vote and that vote is approved, then you're in the drafting process, and you got to come up with some document that works, and that would work if it's approved.
And so we, again, referencing the city of Belfast in our first meeting, because I'm unsure of when some of the other towns had their first meeting. So we said we thought September 4th would be good because it would give us 6 weeks to create the best plan with the other towns to present to the voters for withdrawal. In looking at a selection of withdrawal plans from the cities, Bruce, help me out with this. Glenburn, maybe? It was VZ?
Glenburn, VZ, and Orono.
Right. So Glenburn, VZ, and Orono. Hey, Dorothy. Their plan to withdraw consisted of, I think it was 6 pages. The statutes took about 6 pages, and a signature page. The 6th page was the signature page. And then there was the other town that we looked at, Starks. And also we now have a copy of the Frankfurt withdrawal, which is much longer. So we have guidelines to create the plan. We understand that the different towns have met or formed committees, so we're under the deadline of October 23rd, we can ask for one 90-day extension. I know, Chuck, did you call the Department of Education on this, or?
Yes.
Can you update the?
Bruce Barley and I both have called, and we both have similar, and Bruce can correct me if it's different, but I was told that within that 90 days, you're to submit a plan. Our deadline would be October 31st in Searsmont. We're allowed to put in writing prior to that one 90-day extension. And Bruce and I both talked to different people, and this is where it varied a little bit, but I asked what would happen if we did not meet that extension. And I was met with a pause, and she said she did not know, and that she would get back to me, and she has not. That was a week ago. And she also said that I should remind my committee that this is, we're bound by law to come up with a plan.
Right.
So I'm sensing there's some frustration from the state level as well that, we're treading on new territory here.
Eric?
Yep.
I talked with the deputy commissioner, and basically, he said the same thing that Chuck did. He did say to me that if more than one extension was needed, it would be granted.
Okay. Belfast's committee wishes to have a vote in the spring. We wish to vote before the end of the school year for two reasons. One was the new superintendent, bless you, new superintendent indicated to me that they would need as much leeway with budget season, which I believe starts in January, maybe even earlier now, but January, February. And so a vote sooner rather than later would indicate to them how their budget would look for the next year for RSU 20. And the other reason was if the withdrawal vote is successful, then the new RSU needs to be formed, a new board or transference of board, however that works, would need to be created. So it's Belfast's wish is we can create a plan, we feel confidently, especially a 5 or 6 page plan. It really works in everybody's best interest, this is me speaking personally, if every town in SAD 34 were to commit to it, it makes it easier to separate. We were looking at a budget, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, Bruce? Was it 3 years when? There hasn't been any significant spending increases in 3 years.
That's correct.
For the budget. Teachers' contracts, I think, have remained the same.
It's still to be negotiated.
So the budget numbers from 3 years ago would be relevant enough for the plan. So it would be our viewpoint that we would simply take the budget from that time, separate it back out, go over it with a fine-tooth comb, add where we need to add for things that have changed, for example. And then the numbers would be there, and we would be able to articulate to our communities what the numbers were. We could have community meetings. And then we would submit this plan en masse, if you were, to the Department of Education. And then that's when there's up to 30 days, up to 60 days, up to this. So them getting it back to us with any adjustments. We had a timeline that we printed off that's on the website. And we were looking at a mid to late March vote based on a submission date of October 23rd. So we worked our way backwards, knowing that the new superintendent asked for a vote rather than near the end of the year, of school year, earlier, and then looking at the creation of, giving the new RSU if successful, time to organize. The other thing to articulate is that if all SAD 34 towns do choose to participate in this withdrawal plan, then each town would, I think, need to pass votes collectively, individually, not collectively. So, which is very, very important. Just take any city of Belfast would need to pass by the last gubernatorial election. We have the numbers. It would need to pass 50% of that participation vote. And we have each town's participation vote for the last gubernatorial election. So either a 2/3 majority or enough people that voted, 50% at least that voted in the last gubernatorial. So those are the options presented to us on this vote. So that's all the background information. Anything y'all want to add?
I'd just like to reiterate that one of the neat things that came out of the Belmont meeting is the idea of why shouldn't we just look at an alternate plan? You know, why not just look at it? Because that's all we're doing at this point. We'll design it, look at it, I'm sure it'll be well debated, but that's the stage we're in. Let's just drop a plan, look at it, and we'll have to negotiate that plan with the existing school board, things around property, et cetera, and then it goes to the commissioner, all the while I'm sure we're talking about it, for his input, changes, et cetera. So it's a lengthy process, and the timeline is nothing that was derived from Belfast. It was strictly from statute. It was, they need this much time, so we just took the law and worked backwards.
Are there any questions from anybody in the audience before we proceed with anything? It's a public meeting, so.
Eric, I have a question.
Can I pass you the microphone?
I think they can hear me all right. I don't think I need my, I'm pretty vocal and loud, I guess. I just want a clarification because I've read the law quite thoroughly myself, but we got a lawyer here. I'd like to have her clarification. This vote of either a percentage of the people that voted, not in their last gubernatorial election, but it's also in the statute that a number of people that voted for this withdrawal process, or is it, we've got to have a 2/3 vote of the people that voted in the last gubernatorial election? I'm confused by this, because I think it says two different things in two different statutes.
Okay, the statute I read indicated it was an either-or situation on the vote. And Kristen, if you want to research that, if you don't have the answer. It was my understanding was that it was 2/3 majority, or at least 50% of the number of people that voted in the last gubernatorial election, and then one vote above that.
Well, I guess my next question is, who determines which way you count the vote?
It's the town votes. Yeah, the town votes.
I understand that.
Okay.
Let me give
All
you
I see in the statute is if a 2/3 majority of the voters voting on the article have voted in favor of withdrawal, then it passes. I don't see a fallback of
So there's an amendment.
50%.
There is an amendment of 50% in there as well.
They just changed it.
Okay.
So it's an either-or, Bruce, but I don't think it has anything to do with how many people vote, as long as it's at least half the number that voted in your town's last gubernatorial election. And the numbers that we had drawn, and again, I'm trying to look for the paperwork, I'm going to say it was 200 and some for Searsmont.
601 voted in the last GOP, there was 301.
Was that what it was?
We need to vote.
So 301.
We need 201 votes in favor for it to pass. No?
No, that would be 2/3.
Oh, of course, simple majority, right, so.
Right, it would need half of,
So 150.
1 over half.
151.
So another way to paraphrase,
160 to 150.
if you get more than half to come out to vote, that voted, then it'll be a simple majority. If you don't, it's 2/3.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, right there.
Yeah. That's right, so it's 2/3 majority is required, but it has to be over 50% of the total number of votes cast for the governor at the last election.
To flip into a majority.
Yep.
No other questions? Okay. So, I guess at this time, I'll do a random sample of the towns here present and committee members who have been meeting. I understand this is our 7th meeting, I think. So, and I know the other towns have had meetings. Some towns, Deb, Northport I haven't heard from, but what direction are you leaning towards tonight? Are you in with creating a plan together with Belfast and other towns, or where do you stand? I'll start with Searsmont.
I'll speak to that. We had just decided last week that we'd come tonight. It was an exhaustive search and looking at all different options. We worked very hard. We've got a lot of information from other committees. The committee members in Searsmont have all kind of went to different directions every week and getting different homework and making phone calls and getting numbers. We talked a lot about K through 5 option, a 3, 4, and 5 standalone option, and all those were too cost exhaustive. They were really cost prohibitive. The numbers were staggering, and the amount of different contracts you'd have and agreements. Time constraints certainly a problem. And in the end, we ended up agreeing just last week that we would work on this larger plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Belfast is excited, thank you. Your all's closing date for submission, you said was
October
Halloween?
31st.
So,
This doesn't look like it'll wrap up. I imagine we'll be asking for an extension in writing. I'd like to know, I think we agreed last meeting that we would want to send that extension out by mid-October if that wasn't going. We don't want to wait too long and miss it. Because we can always ask for an extension and get this done, even 2 days after October 31st, but it's not, I don't think it's anything to mess around with.
I know that we can file for a 90-day extension. They may ask us, what is the state of the plan? They may not.
Yeah.
But certainly...
Did you get some clarification on that?
No, but I don't think, the way he talked, it was pretty general. In other words, if you need an extension, as long as you aren't finished with the process,
Right.
then they'll automatically give you an extension.
Okay. Well, Belfast is, we still feel confident that since tonight's September 10th, that we can certainly create a plan by the 23rd of October. But I'll hear from, thank you, and I'll hear from the other towns. Belmont, Steve, you said you're here?
We haven't got anything back from the commission, we just voted, so.
Do you have?
We don't even have a.
Committee?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. But they voted at the meeting Tuesday night. You might not have been here when,
Yeah, it was.
12 to 4 or something?
Yeah, it was 12 to 4. Yeah.
okay.
Big turnout.
And Northport, Deb, I lean on you because I know you so well, but does Northport's committee met or?
Oh, yeah, we've met several times.
Okay. Is your interpretation of the statute different from ours?
It was initially, it's not now.
Okay,
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 that's been cleared up.
okay.
Yeah, we have decided to file for an extension because we need more time to research. We have not come to a decision yet on what plan we'd like to do. We've looked at Lincolnville, which is handy to us.
Yeah.
And they're full. They're full.
They're full?
They're full, they can't take our elementary. So that changes things for us. So we're still exploring, but we are finding out the numbers and the cost and all of that, and there's quite a bit of cost involved. We were thinking about, going it on our own for
Yeah.
K-5 and tuitioning out the rest of them. And we haven't discovered what those numbers are yet, but we're in the process of getting them. We think it's going to be cost prohibitive. But we think we need that information to give to the taxpayers and voters so they can make a good choice.
Yeah, that's exactly what Searsmont Committee thought. We'd be glad to share any information until
Thank you.
we've got a lot of
Do you know
numbers.
when you're meeting next?
A week from Thursday,
What time do you usually?
6:30 at the town hall.
Morrill? Thank you, Deb.
When is your extension good for the 90 days?
Yes.
So you've already submitted that, or?
No, they're going to submit it.
Do you know when the first 90 days is up?
I do not.
Who's the chairman of your committee?
We didn't really elect a chairman.
Okay.
The select person is acting as the chairman, that's Paul Rooney.
Already? Okay.
Right. And he's going to talk with the selectmen, and it's their plan to file for the extension.
Because I got an email from him tonight indicating he didn't think the vote was to withdraw. That's why I was asking. So is he aware now that it was to?
I believe so,
Okay.
but I will make contact with him.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tony, Morrill?
Yeah, Morrill has decided the only feasible direction is to join with Belfast, and hopefully all the former 34 towns can reform a Agree.
So you're willing to commit to creating this plan with us? And
Yes.
we'll put you in charge of the subcommittee then.
That's what I was hoping for.
So Swanville, now, Butch, I know you and Alexa are both here.
Yeah, there's a few of us from Swanville. We are going to have a revote on the 25th. That has been established by the selectmen. So Tuesday, the 25th. For those of you who don't know, the commissioner ruled that the wording of the Swanville referendum was not up to snuff, and so we've got to do it again. So we did have a committee formed, but at this point, with a revote, that committee is no longer in an official capacity, so we have to wait.
So the plan would be to revote on the 25th, and if the town again passes,
Reform the committee.
Reform the committee.
ASAP.
which probably might be the same committee, might not, but it's up to the selectmen. So,
Is there any field, Butch?
I don't think I should publicly say that there's a field.
Good point.
I'm not in an official capacity.
Good point.
Other residents of Swanville might speak up, but
or not.
Any on that beers?
not.
All right, so that's Searsmont, Belmont, Morrill, Swanville, Belfast, and Northport. So at this time, Belfast and Morrill and Searsmont have all decided to create a plan together. And then the other three towns, just to recap the state of this here to make sure I've got it correctly, Belmont has voted to withdraw, create a withdrawal plan, but since it just happened last Tuesday, it's probably going to be...
I don't know, I'd have to find out from the selectmen because they're the one that's going to pick the committee.
All right. Do you know when their next town meeting is, Steve?
They meet every Tuesday night.
Every Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay. So tomorrow night?
I assume so. I don't know if they're waiting to hear back from the commissioner or whether they're just going to do it on their own or what. I'm not sure what the statute is about that.
Okay. And Northport is going to, Debbie, Northport is going to file an extension
Right.
to consider its options. Okay. So that's where I'm at right now. You have 3 towns saying yes and 3 towns saying don't know.
Eric?
Yes.
Searsmont hasn't said yes yet.
Okay, well, your committee chairman just told me yes, so.
We haven't decided what we're going to do yet.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
That's different than what I remember the meeting being. You said sitting at the meeting that we should probably work on a plan with 6 towns rather than go it alone. Valerie and Sarah both nodded. I said, yes, that's a great idea. That's what we're doing Monday. And here we are. So this is news to me.
Well, what my understanding was, if we were going to investigate this more, we all wanted to see more information, more dollar figures, and this is why we hadn't decided to go yet.
Dollar figures from who, Bruce?
From the dollar figures at what this would cost as opposed to staying in the RSU 20.
Okay. So at this time, Searsmont has not.
We'll meet Wednesday and try to hammer this out.
Yeah.
Do you think you can give us an answer soon, or?
Well, let's hear again.
I got 3.
This is up to the committee. I can't speak for the committee.
Right, I know, your chairman did. Clearly, he was taking some nods as a yes. So maybe you guys can get back to us when you hear.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
You're welcome.
At this point, we have 2 towns. We have Belfast and Morrill. Swanville is possible. Searsmont is possible. Northport's asking for an extension, and Belmont just voted. So, as a committee, I think now we need to determine, in terms of Belfast creating a plan, what direction should we take? Should we create a plan with Belfast and Morrow? Should we create a plan with all 6 towns to show them what the numbers look like? What should we do, committee? I'll open it up to you and Kristen.
I think, I just wanted to comment on Bruce's statement with the understanding, again, I come back to the first thing, he said, you have a mission to come up with an alternate plan. How the numbers fall. You don't have, and again, I'll refer to Kristen, I don't think you have the option of saying, we don't have a plan.
I think clearly the statute indicated you have a time limit, you can ask for an extension, but at some point you have to submit a plan for public vote. The best plan, I think the statute is the best plan. So clearly a plan that is the best that you can come up with. Kristen?
Yeah, there's certainly nothing wrong though with studying, the plan of everybody going it together versus staying in the RSU, because you're trying to determine what's the best cost savings between this plan or some other plan. But there has to be a withdrawal plan.
Yep.
Bruce?
I think, this is my own opinion, I don't know about the rest of the committee, but I would like to see Belfast plan. And if that plan looks good to me, well, maybe we might want to modify it a little bit. Somebody's got to go ahead here and create a plan, and I think, in my mind, if Belfast created a plan, I mean, you're definitely ahead of us, it looks like to me. And if you create a plan, we like the plan, I think probably, why should we all come up with a separate plan? I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we're not asking you to come up with a separate plan. We're asking you to work with us to create one plan. But if what I'm hearing you is right, and I think it is, you're interested in Belfast creating a plan that includes your town in it?
It could.
To see how it would shake out.
To see how the numbers look like.
To see how it looks like, yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that with us?
Yeah, I would want input on that plan, personally. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, your committee will need to decide what to do.
Right, that's right.
You would have time if you don't like how it works out and what it looks like to ask for an extension and then work on your own.
Right.
And that same rule would apply to everyone.
That's true.
I think, Eric, we're all kind of up in the air here about this. I think all of us have questions about, I seem to be doing all the talking.
But you won't take a mic.
But I think we all have questions. We all would like to go in a certain direction, but we don't really quite know where we want to go. Does that sound logical to you?
You know, sometimes
It sounds good. I mean, it's true.
when I have to draft a complicated contract, I always, instead of sitting and talking about everything, I start drafting and wait until the issues present themselves in the drafting process. And maybe that's the approach we need to take here, is to just figure out what we need to get on paper and to work together as much as we can. But then if we reach points where we diverge, there's the opportunity to change tax.
Yep. We have until October 23rd. And again, we're of the mind that we could reasonably in 2 weeks have the plan created for the entire SAD, 34 old numbers. Because again, we're going to go off of the budget from 3 years ago, which has not changed drastically, if at all. Take the numbers out, put them back into the plan as the old standalone SAD 34, and we can show you the difference or what it would cost comparatively to each town, which I think is what you're saying. You don't want to commit to a plan that's going to hurt your town.
Oh, absolutely not.
Well, I don't want you to do that either. we're pretty confident that it's going to look good for your town. So that's why we invited you to join.
Eric, can I just interject something that,
Please.
everyone talk about numbers, money. To me, this is about what we would like to see our education look like. Do we want to keep our local schools, our community schools? And I said this before, the only way the RSU 20 is now existing will save money is by closing local schools. So it's not just about numbers. There's a lot more involved in whether it's going to save our town, and I'll say Swanville as a citizen, whether it will save Swanville X amount of dollars. Obviously, if it costs us a great deal more, then you might be looking at numbers. But if you're talking about education and keeping your community schools and keeping things that we have had in the past that worked for the former SAD 34 that we are now perhaps losing or threatened to lose, then I think that's a different game. And I think we need to remember that.
Well, I don't disagree. I personally, and I've told people this, I think the value of this isn't just about money, or, because I've also, what if we created the new SAD 34 and a year or two down the line, everybody take a deep breath, they decide they got to close one of those schools, the new board that we've created, right? So, but we would have a little more control in that decision than I feel we would today with the larger RSU.
Right.
It has nothing to do in my mind with the fact that Searsport and Stockton Springs, and at least up to now Frankfurt, joined with old SAD 34. It's about our ability to make creative decisions versus today where it's a little more spread out and you have some building occupancy
Issues.
situations that if you were not part of the RSU anymore, you wouldn't. Your choices may not be any easier, but your answers would come from a different way. And so I would agree with you that to me it's not just about money, but I've heard from Bruce and other people that money is very important to people. I think the fear is that the new plan will cost more money. The fear. We'll create the plan, or we'll discuss as a committee whether to create a plan. I'd like to hear from the other towns if they want us to include what the old SAD 34 would look like. But we can do that as a committee. We wouldn't be adding anything or subtracting anything that didn't already exist. It would just be moving the numbers out. You could certainly look at it to make sure, but there wouldn't be anything added in or taken out to my knowledge. So, but I think educationally, there's been a lot of talk about the RSU and how the cultures are different or not different. And, I'm not involved because I'm not in the school system. So I'm just looking at it from, as a member of the city council who was asked to be on this committee.
And I'd like to look at it at a different tack. That we were forced into this by a governor, top down, boom. And everybody involved tried to make the best deal possible, and they have, and they worked incredibly hard. This is the opportunity for the first time, and I'm going to say a century chance, for the citizens to create their own system. And that's totally different, and I was involved since January in that grassroots stuff, and parents are here, et cetera, and thinking about it, and you're all part of it. This is not a top-down decision by any means. It's a grassroots going to design your own school system. Yeah, maybe it takes the structure of SAD 34 for easy transfer of property, et cetera, or easier, but the guts are going to come from you. And then it does involve a new board, and there may be, you may have pet things you want, and maybe the boilerplate design doesn't fit it, but maybe your new board does. And I guess I see a real opportunity here for the first time in many, many years.
Tony, your hand was up earlier, I didn't recognize you.
Thanks. Couple things. We all know there's a lot of unknowns, and we're all concerned about the ultimate direction and the impact it's going to have on each of our communities. And first, I'd just like to comment, Searsmont, our two communities are so tied, Morrill and Searsmont, our two schools are so related. I hope whatever we decide, it's together. You know, whatever direction it is, we really need to keep our communities together. And at this point, it does seem to many of us that the reforming of the former 34 with those 6 towns it appears to be the most viable direction. Now, Bruce, you mentioned you want to see costs, you want to see the plan. Well, I do too, and we're not alone. But my understanding of putting the plan together, we need to know how many towns are going to be in that plan. So the impact it's going to have on the schools and the impact it's going to have on that total budget. And it includes, as Steve already mentioned, negotiating over buildings and property and that kind of thing. And I don't know that we would get the RSU to negotiate with us on a plan if it's kind of a maybe plan. I think we would have to know how many towns are in that plan so that they know, okay, we're going to negotiate with you and this is going to be a final done deal negotiation, not just a trial to see, you know, how's it going to shake out. So I think it's very important that the towns, as soon as possible, make a decision if they're going to be part of the plan, at least to the point where we can go forward with the plan to see what ultimate impact it's going to have, including these negotiations. Because that could be a big hit to the budget, you know, what it's going to cost to negotiate to keep these school buildings. So I would just ask everyone to try and expedite making their decision as soon as possible so we can go forward with a plan that we know will be the final plan we're trying to negotiate.
We have to have a final agreement. I mean, that's where the statute uses the word agreement. It's an 11-point agreement. So, okay, we come up with a plan, but now, as Tony's saying, I'm just piggybacking what he's saying, it's got to be negotiated with RSU 20 and come to agreement.
With RSU 20.
With RSU 20. I believe I read in the Portland paper that we're not the first and only doing this. I think there are 20 to 30 other systems doing it. I think 4 have come to an agreement. It's a new process. You know, I'll tell you right now, so a little forgiveness maybe for an occasional slip or error. I believe we're the only one that's trying to take all the towns from a district, because this is what the legislature made us do. They didn't make it easy for us. All 6 towns and pull out. And so, you know, we're new ground breaking ice all the time.
Well, although I have heard that the Department of Education understands if the 6 towns were to try to reform under the same plan, and that wouldn't seem unusual to them in terms of the plan being presented. If I could touch briefly, because there's a lot of people here not from Belfast, but again, just to recap, Morrill is the only town who has committed to actually doing the plan outright. We need to negotiate with the RSU. And we cannot negotiate with the RSU, to Steve's point, until we know who the heck's with us. And
or we can't do an artificial plan. It needs to be
right.
A viable, real plan.
But the negotiations will need to happen before and be approved by the board before we submit the plan. So we'd like to submit the plan by October 23rd because that's the 90-day period for Belfast. So I'm not surprised at the thought process expressed here tonight. But from our side of things, we need to know who we're creating a plan for real as soon as possible, because we need to begin negotiations with the RSU. Valerie?
I'm just a little confused on the only basic question. I've had 2 questions throughout this whole process. What's the educational benefit? And secondly, how much is it going to cost? I came to the 18th meeting, and that was my big question. How much is it going to cost? A moment ago, I don't think I knew that. A moment ago, you talked about how easy it would be to take the budget from 3 years ago, break it in half.
Not in
But
well,
now we're saying, now Susan's just said that we can't do an artificial plan.
we can't go to the school board without a known plan. I can't go to the school.
That's kind of the next step in the process, though.
Can I answer the
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
Thanks. I can't go to the school board, or the negotiation committee can't go to the school board with a maybe plan. We need to know which towns are behind this plan and support it. So Susan's point, I believe, and she can articulate if I'm wrong, is that the plan can't be artificial when presenting it to the school board. We need to know Belfast and who wish to withdraw, negotiate with the RSU board just one time. Not, we're thinking RSU board, there might be 6 towns, but we're not sure because they haven't committed to it, but we're going to go ahead and negotiate it. We can't negotiate.
I understand that process,
Okay.
that's not my question. 20 minutes ago, you spoke of being able to take the budget from 3 years ago.
Yes.
And it was, there wasn't a lot of increases. So it would give us a good idea of what this is going to look like.
Yeah. You could do that too. Your committee could do that too. I gave you guys the numbers a month ago. You have yet to do and look at the numbers.
Well, we took the current budget and broke it down the best we could. I don't have it. Do you have it?
I've given my committee the numbers that Tony gave us that were straight from John McDonald for the last 5 years of the budget broken down. Perhaps they did not have a chance to get a look at it.
We've got it looked at.
Okay. I guess my point is, we can do the work, or you can do the work with us. That doesn't matter to us, but we don't want to do the work if you're not interested in doing it. And when I say it's easy to separate the numbers, it's easy to separate the numbers as long as we know whose numbers were separated. Is that?
Right.
So we can draw up a plan for 6 towns, but in a couple of weeks, and that's how long it's going to take, just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, but I don't want to go before the RSU 20 board with a separation, a negotiation plan of 6
And
towns.
if your town isn't part of it, then we've got to negotiate a different plan.
Right.
Well,
I would, go ahead.
it seems to me that Belfast is ahead of the rest of us, maybe, in looking at all of this, and you've decided you're going to draw up a plan. I don't know how far you've got in that process, but you say a couple of weeks? Or if you draw up a tentative plan, say you draw up a tentative plan that includes us all, so we can look at it.
Yeah, I would be uncomfortable with that personally. As a committee member, I'd want to be in on that plan. I don't want to be handed a plan without input.
Well, I don't disagree with that, Chuck, either.
Yeah, I didn't think you would.
But the question becomes, guys, it's September 10th, and I understand what you're saying. It's September 10th, and if we create a plan for the entire old SAD 34 in a couple of weeks, then how long do we give it to you before we know whether you accept it or not? Because we still can't negotiate, right, until then. So if it's a couple of weeks after, then it's October 10th. And that leaves us with 13 days to negotiate with the RSU 20 board and submit it. And I don't think that's enough time. So I guess instead, since you guys have been here a month ago, I think it was a month ago, what besides educational value, which since I'm not in the school system, I'll defer to other people in terms of what educational value that Valerie's asking about her, one of 2 questions. What educational value is it? And then, and we'll go from there. I'll stop there. Yes, Alexa.
I feel like this is way too complicated.
Yeah.
The options, the way I understand it, are standalone, and I've heard every community that's been able to meet say they can't afford to stand alone. So that leaves you with 2 options: staying in RSU 20, and at this point you know what your education looks like, and you know what your financial responsibility is for that. And the third option is to join the, former SAD 34. And that's what this committee's working on. So I just don't see why there's so many questions. If you can't, I've heard every town say they can't afford to stand alone. And the vote was to withdraw from RSU 20.
And
So
create a plan.
create a plan.
I share your frustration.
So the third step is to join 34. So I don't get what all this conversation
It
is
would
about.
be easier to negotiate with the current RSU 20 board if we knew who was with us. And that's no disrespect meant to Bruce, I understand.
I understand that.
So, but that's where we're at.
I think this, and again, it comes back to an opening statement I made. Whether, the design, let's face it, it's the state statute. School board member has to be on it, and if you're the only school board member from that time, you're on it whether you like it or not. That's what the state just did to you. And a town government person. And that's what the state just did to you. And you may agree, you may disagree, you may not like the plan, and it's your right once the plan is just adopted in that next stage, as it's negotiated and is debated around every town. You can be against it. But to me, the statute is clear. You've got to come up with an alternative plan, period.
And then you vote.
And then, once we get an alternative plan, then we've got the debate and the negotiation, et cetera. And don't forget, even after that, it goes to the commissioner. So now, I come back to the original statement, you just got to have a plan. And you got to have it ASAP, and it's statute.
That's right.
I have a question. The plan has to be approved by the Department of Education before the vote takes place, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yep, here's a timeline for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. It's got to be negotiated with your RSU first. And once that agreement happens, and it's an 11-point agreement, then it's sent to the commissioner, who then throws in his 2 cents worth, sends it back to you for either revision or tentative okay. And then you have public meetings, and way at the end comes that vote.
Before the plan is submitted to the DOE, we need to successfully negotiate with the RSU 20. So, time matters ultimately. And that's why we're here tonight. And I appreciate the crowd. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I need this or not. I'm Ellen DeFries from Searsmont, and I have sort of a side perspective. I'm a parent of a child who just is partway through middle school, but she just came through Gladys Weymouth in the Ames school system. And the last I checked in on all of this was last spring. I have to admit I feel somewhat delinquent at this point. Tonight is sort of my first figuring out what's going on, more or less. But of course we all went through last winter worrying so much about what was going on with this big entity called RSU 20, and some of us in these country towns wondering were our kids going to have those long bus rides. I mean, there was all sorts of anxiety around that. And then there was the vote in various towns, and in Searsmont, it was a resounding vote to explore withdrawal and be part of a process. Right. So I sort of folded up my interest at that point and thought, okay, this is good, because my only solution to all that I was seeing unfolding in the RSU was, isn't there some way we can work together as the old SAD 34 or some version thereof where we have more? So I'm just... it's interesting to be sitting here tonight. I can appreciate that various people are in various places with their decision-making, but I, for one, am just so in favor of Searsmont going down this withdrawal track, and actually I feel energized by everything that's gone on tonight, because I didn't realize you had moved as far as you had, and that it makes sense to me that a plan could be put together and that you would need more towns to say yes. But just as so many of the speakers have said, it's hard for me to imagine sitting in our completely beloved little town and trying to imagine going out on our own, and therefore combine that with the original withdrawal decision, and it seems fairly straightforward. And I recognize that our committee has been working for a while, and I didn't pay attention because it was summer and school hadn't started. But I think more of us will pay attention because we do really care. And And my hat's off to all of you for the amount of time you've already put in, and I know our committee has some decision-making to do, I guess, to cross some Ts and dot some Is, but I certainly hope, that it won't be too long before Searsmont can be part of the SAD 34 discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Another voice from Searsmont. Hi, Tanya Tibbetts. I'll just make one comment. I'm really surprised that all the towns didn't have the same wording on the ballot. That's just point made. No, for all the towns, I'm just thinking, what did some agree to and what didn't some agree to, and is this really okay? So.
The town of Swanville's.
Don't look at me, I'm just a parent.
The town of Swanville, which is extremely welcome to join this, had a vote which was ultimately, unfortunately, rejected as the wording was different than they found acceptable. So it
Wasn't that the only town that didn't copy the wording out of the statute?
That's
Yeah.
my understanding.
So everyone else got it right except for Swanville.
The law said word it this way.
So there was a question about alternative education. I don't have the original Swanville, but the wording was different. Swanville passed it, to their credit, but the state says they got to do a revote. So we're pretty confident that they'll vote that way again. So, yes?
Deb Newcomb from Swanville.
Can you get your mic there?
Yeah, if I speak up, you probably don't need it. Good, thanks. I guess my ultimate question is if it passed at the town level, why are the committees hesitant to move forward with what the town said yes to?
You can ask the committees, they're right here.
It makes no sense to me.
I'm getting a sense that people are feeling a little bit rushed, maybe, and that Belfast is moving ahead at a faster clip, because we've been doing this longer, and we're taking the lead on this plan, and lots of other towns haven't had the time to think about it that this committee has. And obviously, people are going to be a little reluctant to just follow the leader if they haven't taken the time to really think it through. So if there's any way we can figure out timing to make it more comfortable for everyone, certainly we can think about that.
Yep, I have no problems with it.
No, I was just holding the mic. As a committee member from Laurel, I am frustrated with the committees because, again, just like she was saying, we need to, making the plan isn't going to be a
life-changing event?
No, it's not. It's going to be.
The vote might be.
Right, exactly. The committee members have got to put aside personal feelings and just do what the town has asked them to do. Create their plan, whether you go off on your own or join Belfast, doesn't really matter if you can.
And Morrow.
If you want to create your own. It comes down to, you have your personal opinion as a committee member during the public hearings and during the vote. Right now, we've just been charged by the towns to create a plan. I don't know why, let's just get the plan created. Morrow's chosen to go with Belfast. If you choose to go on your own, that's fine, but you don't have a choice but to do it now. So why fight it and just get going and making the plan?
And all we need to know is who wants to do it with Belfast and Morrow, and Swanville needs to vote again. But again, the negotiations, and Deb, I'm going way out in the left field here, but are you still on the negotiation committee? So, and Steve? So the two people from the RSU 20 current board that are on the negotiations committee are also serving as committee members for withdrawal.
When it comes time for negotiating, we cannot negotiate property. Like, we can't be on the RSU negotiating team.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, so, I mean, each town cannot be on the negotiating team for their own property.
Each town cannot.
In other words, Dorothy cannot be on the RSU
the negotiating
team for the schools because she's from Belfast. It has to be somebody that's not from Belfast.
Are you saying that's something in the law?
Yes, it is.
Which law?
You'll have to ask Mr. Carpenter. He was the one that said that you're not allowed to have the person that is a resident of the town be on the negotiating team for the RSU.
For Brian?
That's what I was told.
Well, I know it doesn't make any sense either way, I mean, that would be awkward at best for you two to be on either side of that. I'm not,
But I don't recall the
What's that?
statute even talking
It would
about
be a conflict of interest.
it wouldn't work.
Bruce can speak to that, because it wouldn't be a conflict of interest, as he discussed it
What's
at
that?
one of our meetings. Bruce, I asked you the question, when it does come time to negotiate the buildings, that there is sort of this conflict with a board member being part of the committee.
Sure.
And you made a comment about their financial responsibility as a board member, they would have to vote to give the buildings back, basically. Can you just maybe speak to that?
Well, if let's say the negotiations fell apart with the RSU 20 board, a board member, if the 5 towns, if there's only 5 towns, 4 towns decided to go away, and they couldn't come to an agreement on the buildings, I would hope that existing board members would be looking into the financial impact of that decision, because if those 5 towns chose to tuition their students out or some other arrangement so that they weren't using these buildings, somebody's going to have to pay to maintain these buildings, somebody's going to have to keep these buildings up.
Right.
That's going to be a fairly significant expense to a board without a lot of, if those students have all gone somewhere else. So they need to see the other side of the situation. There's going to be a cost incurred in these buildings if they're not occupied. And RSU 20 is going to, or whoever the entity is going to be left with that.
This statute, the withdrawal statute, doesn't say anything about who's on the the negotiating committee. All it says is that you can and will negotiate the transfer of property.
And I took the step, with the approval of the City of Belfast Withdrawal Committee Board, whatever you want to call it, committee. Since October 23rd is still our time frame, hopefully, I recommended some people to the committee, and they agreed for me to at least ask them. Kristen Collins is the lawyer representing the City of Belfast in the withdrawal. She's offered her services on Belfast's dime, not yours, to represent whoever is in this plan. So at the negotiation table, since we still have towns that can't determine whether to withdraw or not, or there was discussion about the interpretation of the statutes, and because I'm on the city council, this committee agreed to ask Roger Lee, who is a lawyer who serves on the city council. Nancy Hamilton is an alternate. She's on the city council from the East Belfast side. Kristen Collins, a lawyer, and Mike Hurley, who's also on the City of Belfast and is probably one of the loudest people you'll ever meet in negotiations. So we have a negotiation committee ready to represent anybody and everybody who's on this plan. So that's been, because we need to negotiate and also give the RSU 20 board negotiation team time to set up meetings or meeting. And we need to do that as soon as possible.
And we can bring others into our
Sure.
negotiation team, and probably should.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah,
I don't know if we want to go 20 on 4,
We
but,
might do the whole thing.
you know. Yes, Deb.
Okay, so I guess I'll approach it as a legal angle now.
That would be, look at her then.
If the towns voted, and a majority of the town, be it minute, that we had, 74 of us that said yes, and 43 of us that said no, with 1,200 people in our town, whoop! But anyways, it was a majority of the people that voted, that said yes, we want to withdraw, and then we have to re-vote. But every committee member here, their same towns, they wouldn't be here unless that town said, yes, we want to pursue the withdrawal from our RSU 20.
That's correct. All the towns
How
did.
do 4 committee members legally disregard what the voters said for their action to do? Because now you have 4 personalities that are saying, we don't want to do this. But the people who voted said, yes, we want to pursue it. How can committee members then come to you and say, whoa, we don't want to do that? The voter said, yes, we do. Where does the legal right of the voter stand in this mess?
Well,
At least pursuing.
Yeah. I'll address it. I have a mic here too. One of the problems built into this committee process is 4 people. So if a committee hasn't committed, it's not that the whole committee has said we're not going to commit to this. It's that could be 3 people, could be 4, but could be 2 and 2. So you need 3 people on the committee to commit. So if a committee hasn't committed one way or the other, it's because they haven't got 3.
But that's my question.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It's not the committee that commits to the
That's
separation.
correct.
It's the voter who said, yes,
I know.
pursue this.
I agree with you 100%.
Now it's being held up by a committee, which could delay it and be a problem.
I agree with you. It is.
Well, I agree, that's the law, we have to submit a plan, that's the law. It's just that the questions that we all have about what direction we're going in.
That's fine, those are argued out after you submit the plan. You cannot delay the plan.
Gentlemen, I know your hands are raised, but Deb raised her hand first, Deb Riley, and then I'll go to you over here to everyone. Yeah.
It's my is this on?
Should be with us.
It's my understanding that the vote was to pursue a plan to withdraw. It does not stipulate that the plan to withdraw has to be the former 34.
Right.
So we have that freedom and flexibility to explore, and Northport hasn't said, no, they won't join. They said they need more information and more time. If you wanted to draft a plan with Northport's numbers in them, I'm sure the committee would appreciate that if you're willing to do it. They don't have enough information to make a decision right now that that's the best plan for our town.
Outside Lincolnville being full.
Right.
I'd like to bring the discussion a little bit back to what Alexa said earlier, that Morrill, for example, came to the decision that you would want to join with the old SAD 34. And one of the reasons, I think maybe the primary reason, you looked at what it would cost if you were to be a standalone community educating your children. And it seems to me that with all these unknowns, the one number that could be most readily determined would be, what will it cost us if we are a standalone? And then I think if that decision follows what you found in Morrill, the next choice is going to be, is it RSU 20 that we stay in, or do we go to join with Belfast and the old, and it will simplify things. So I hope, Tony, that you share the process that you went through with some of the other committee people, if they're interested, how you quickly determined that it was not in your best interest to stand alone.
Well, I have to correct you a little bit.
Okay.
We didn't do a whole lot of looking at what it would take for Morrill to stand alone.
Okay.
Because it didn't make any sense at all.
Well, it made it easier.
We have identified a lot of cost data relative to the withdrawal, yes, but not specifically what would Morrill look like as a standalone.
Right.
We didn't really go down that road.
One quick point to add, and then I'll turn it over here, Dorothy, is that I don't think part of the vote was to stay with RSU. It's to create a plan to withdraw. A plan to withdraw does not keep the option of staying in RSU 20.
Right, I made a mistake.
Oh, that's right. I just want to make sure.
I meant to say that.
I was looking for,
Yeah.
I think that was right. Okay, the mic's somewhere.
Just to speak a little bit to the hesitancy that some of us have had, and I'm on the Morrill Committee and we're in, not all of us were enthused. It's not that we're opposed. It feels like, I'll speak for myself, that the process is being rushed, in that we, as Morrill, did not study standalone. We didn't study combining with Searsmont and Belmont. We didn't study any other combination for withdrawal. We've took a vote based on the one choice before us, and I think that's what Searsmont's hesitancy, Northport's, is we haven't taken the time. We were rushed into this process, and I myself feel we're being rushed into this new collaboration. Not that we're opposed, not that I'm opposed to it, but we haven't had time to study all the options.
And in response to that, I just want to lay the blame where it belongs, because you are rushed, but it's state statute. You know, it's not Belfast. You know, the commissioner is going to say, if you want extension, okay, why? And then where's your plan? You know, that's really what's going to happen. Now, it's that state statute and the timeline we did that required us to keep this timeline. under the assumption now that the present superintendent of schools asked us
At the first meeting
to
that
try
we
to
had.
get it as a vote, yea or nay, as early as possible, so both sides, if that's a yes vote, they've got to scramble.
Just, and to follow up, the second part of the hesitancy, if the money aspect of it, is when the informational sessions were taking place, I think 3 out of the 4 arguments, in the basis of the withdrawal plan was financial consideration. And as a committee, if I couldn't come up with a plan that substantiated that argument, I have to sit back and say, is this the right decision to move with this plan? So there's some hesitancy, not necessarily opposition, in the speed and in the financial and everything. I have a problem with taking numbers from 3 years ago, plugging them in and saying, this is what the financial aspect's gonna look like, when we won't know that until February, when state revenue and all those things that come into play are plugged in, which I know that's part of the process, but...
It's also part of the current RSU's 20s process and something they have to struggle with every year, and it's a reality that we all live in. I mean, I hear you about the hesitancy, and I don't disagree, but in terms of feeling rushed, I know that we've had, early August we met, we said we'll give you the month of August, and I'm sorry that a month is not long enough, I truly am. People have been talking about Belfast being leaders or rushing, or maybe not saying Belfast is rushing, maybe it's the statutes, but I think one of the best things and worst things we did was Brian Carpenter said, a vote in March before the budget so that they don't want to scramble either is important. So we worked backwards and we discovered 3 months from July 23rd happens to be October 23rd. That's when we had our first meeting. That's when we're supposed to submit our plan. It was our hope that SAD 34 would rejoin. Clearly, we think it's beneficial. It's hard to argue with 50-some years of SAD 34. There's a history there, longer than 3 years with the current RSU. So I can think of a lot of reasons to revert back to the towns. But I live in the town of Belfast. I don't live in your community. And finally, I agree with whoever said the committees, you've been tasked to create a plan, not to decide whether to withdraw or not. And although I hear that people are now understanding that, you still, having been tasked with a plan, need to get on with it. And I don't mean that negatively. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to rush anybody, but the clock is ticking on all of us. And it's just a matter of the statutes.
Can I ask this committee, just practically speaking, what changes when you go to put pen to paper on this agreement, whether it's 3 towns that are joining you or 5? I mean, what are the real differences that are going to pose problems in drafting this thing?
Negotiating with RSU 20 is the biggest one.
Property.
I think property.
But in terms of how things break down, what about, schools and property? Will essentially the plan involve the same schools once you get past
Well, you would think so, because Searsmont and Morrill share a principal, they share, gym, music, art teachers. So if Searsmont doesn't go and Morrill does, then you're going to have more expense on the Searsmont side, because they'll have to come up with now potentially a new principal, because a lot of things are shared with Morrill, the Ames School and the Weymouth School. So I would think that it would cost more if Searsmont and Morrill didn't agree on the same thing. And that was kind of my question. Is there anything else? Valerie mentioned that it's expense and education of the children that they're most concerned about in Searsmont. Is there anything else for expense that I'm missing? Because you're going to cover, Belfast would cover the RSU, the attorney fees, and the processing fees to separate.
To mail in the plan?
Exactly, right. And obviously, everyone who potentially lives in Morrill and Searsmont knows that it's a really close-knit community with the Gladys Weymouth and the Ames School. So I think to separate that education would almost be harmful to the kids and not stick together, as having the same principal and having, just that community out there. So I was just wondering if, with that as an excuse not to potentially go with the Searsmont leaving RSU 20, what else would be an expense?
I'm still not sure of the question.
of the question?
I'm such a concrete person. It's hard for me to-
And so, yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't phrase it correctly. Valerie mentioned she was concerned about expense
And
and
education.
education.
Yep.
And you're saying that you'll cover the expense in Belfast to go forth with this withdrawal plan from the RSU. So I was just wondering.
No, it's not the
What-
cost of the
yeah,
plan, it's
I think-
the first year of operation. Whatever.
And then what
Right?
would the additional expenses be for the, if we're going to take each of the individual towns, their old expense from SAD 34,
Right.
and leave SAD 56 with their expense, so we, all the debt goes with theirs, we don't have to pay for some of theirs, and all of our current debt from SAD 34 stays with us. What other expenses would we see that would increase it?
Having, part of the process really started back in January. Again, we can't tell you what the expenses are going to be of the plan until we get into it. But I do know what happens next year if we don't. Your tax bill was pretty heavy this year.
Right, and I would.
I would also tell you that Searsport went down.
Right.
Okay. So we know further expenses coming down the pike. We know that when Frankfurt leaves, they take $1 million subsidy. We know that the cost to educate a Searsport student is based upon figures in 2009 right off the city website. It is $5,000 more than it cost a Belfast student. I mean, that's because of small class size, et cetera. And we know about teacher salaries increasing. We know those are known, that's down the pipe, we know those are happening. And
Those are increases.
Those are increases that are going to happen next year if you're part of RSU.
Right, so I just don't see the disadvantage.
Well, the voters voted anyway for us to create a plan. But your points are valid. To give the current RSU 20 some credit, because a majority of them, and Val, you're new to the board since you joined RSU 20, but Steve, Deb, I'm trying to think who else was on, Alexa, who was a mentor to me, because I was on the school board, they were part of the SAD 34 too.
And we didn't have money then either, though. So
Well, that's true.
my concern. We didn't have money as 34, we don't have money as 20, so how is going back to 34 or something like that going to help us?
I would like to address that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a lot of uncertainty either way you go. And I hear the argument that, about closing schools if we stay in RSU 20, that's not going to go away if we withdraw. And nobody here is going to try to make promises that we will never close schools. However, former SAD 34 schools are all full. Right now, we have plenty of room to close schools and move kids. If we become a SAD 34 format again, and the schools are all full, try to close a school and think about where you're going to put them. There is nowhere to put them. So it becomes a lot less of an issue. That's a big thing for me. I don't have a kid in a school anymore. She's in Orono. I teach here, it's my 24th year. So, not much will change for me as a high school teacher either, if we stay or if we don't, really. So my motives, I have no ulterior motives. I was a petitioner. The petitioning was 6 towns at one time by no accident. And the people who signed mine knew that was no accident and knew that this was the idea, was for all 6 towns to do it at the same time. So we end up here. And little known to me, I would end up as a chair on a committee. I didn't know it would go that far, but here I am, looking into it more and more. And the more I look into pulling out and becoming a SAD 34, the more secure I feel for the future of all the kids in those buildings. We do not have a plumbing population, student population.
Deb?
2 points. If you don't have a sufficient number of towns join the plan to reform the former 34, then you aren't going to have enough students to keep those schools full. That's going to be a cost you need to think about. And the other piece of it is, if the old 34 reforms with all 6 towns, you have the towns in the tri-town area that are at capacity and in need of repair. They're older schools. They probably won't be up for the repairs. You'll be petitioning the state to build a new elementary school.
This is where I differ with a lot of other committee members that are on the fence on this. I feel very confident that the voters want this to happen. And I think that all the towns that are on the fence still haven't committed need to have a town meeting to hear, and the committee members need to hear that from the townspeople. And if I stand corrected,
well,
You'll actually hear me on it.
If I could just step in. Belfast, we don't have time for everybody to have a town meeting to discuss whether or not the towns want to withdraw. They voted. Now, you can argue with me, I'm not going to argue back, that it was 54 to 9, I think, in Searsmont, 12 to 4 in Belmont, 70 to 40 or whatever it was the first time, rejected. Pretty good turnout in Belfast. Clearly the voters had something on their minds towards withdrawal, because that was listed from the statute, support withdrawal and create a committee to create a plan for withdrawal to be voted on. Again, I'm going to give the current RSU 20 board credit in that a lot of them were part of getting SAD 34 and 56 together when the decision was made to consolidate that none of us made. And I was voted the chairperson of the planning committee, and those meetings were contentious. The two cultures were not happy about being forced to consolidate. In the intervening 3 years, I think the current RSU 20 board has done, at least the current board that I'm looking at, has done everything they can to reconcile and work towards a common RSU. That's their job, and kudos to them. What I don't hear from the current RSU, it's early in the school year, so how should I? I got a new superintendent. But I don't have assurances about the $1 million, 100,000 subsidy withdrawal from Frankfurt, where that money is going to come from, except cutting staff or raising taxes. I have a 50% occupancy rate in Searsport. If SAD 34 reforms, we have full schools. They put a new modular, or they voted to put a new modular behind the school out there so they're addressing, the current board is addressing and trying to grow. Nobody is here to paint anybody a villain, at least on this side of the coin. But I refuse to accept that you can't look at holistically reforming SAD 34 and not be happily surprised that we don't think it's going to cost any more. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I have permission to speak or not. I'm a guidance counselor at the high school.
Well, I just called on you, so it's public.
It seems like...
I'll wait and see what you say.
You may not like it. It seems like there are a couple of towns who don't even have their committees formed yet. Swanville and Belmont. And I would be hesitant to agree to a plan I hadn't seen also. Is there any chance that Belfast would be comfortable with a 90-day extension so that those town committees who want to be part of the process can sit with you and hear what you're coming up with to maybe reorganize the former 34, and they have a chance to hear about that and see about it, and then decide if they want to join or not? Would a 90-day extension help them and help you?
The basic problem...
yes. Somewhat.
But the basic problem is your time limit. How much time do you need to make the decision to try a plan? Because that's all you're saying. Is here's a plan, we're going to try it. If we don't like it, I may not personally like it, so I'm not campaigning against it. But we have to have that done, because it's the negotiation of the 11-point agreement is going to take time. And that has to be within.
I know, and I don't know if you...
I could even go so far as to say, if we knew the towns were in with us and we're creating a plan, that we would call up the RSU and say, we're creating a plan, we want to come in and meet with you guys in a week or two, and here are the towns that are a part of it.
Sounds like...
But I don't have that yet.
They're interested in hearing about it, but they're not willing to say, I want to do it, because they haven't seen what it would look like.
We were also here a month ago, and to their credit, we haven't shown them anything. But to our credit, we asked for September 4th decision, and then we extended it a week, and here we are. And we still don't have decisions. And that's kind of what we're looking for, so that we can do two things. Create a plan, one plan, and negotiate. But you're right. To ask for a 90-day extension, just to add to that, doesn't mean you have to take 90 days. So we can submit a plan on October 24th, November 24th, and still try to make the time frame with Brian Carpenter and RSU 20, because the timeline that we have is accounting for the state taking all 30 or 60 days each time before it comes back. And as slow as the state is of stuff, that's a coin flip, you know?
I am happy that my committee is doing their due diligence, because I would be disappointed if I was a Morrill resident and you did not do your due diligence in exploring all options. So thank you for not rushing into a decision, not to say this is not the right one, but I want to know that we explored every possible option, and then, you know what, we decided 34 was what it was. 34 wasn't perfect, and Bruce, nothing personal. We had our issues. So if we're going to go back to something like that, I would want it to be better. If your house burns down, are you going to build the same exact house, or are you going to make it better? Are you going to do a little, nicer roof, put in sliding door, do something better? So I want to save, I want something better than we had. And I think the parents before have said we're willing to pay more, but I need to know what I'm getting. So that's all I want. When I want to know it's going to cost $1,000 more, it's going to be $500 more for me. What am I getting out of that? You're going to get X, Y, Z. You're going to have your full-time nurse. You're going to have your own gym. You're going to have gym every day of the week. What am I getting out of that?
When do you want us to draw that up?
Tonight.
Perfect.
Let's start going.
Perfect. But you understand, your arguments, and they're great arguments, your arguments come when we can draw up a plan. It's not your arguments, so we need permission to draw up a plan, and then we can show it.
Then if I don't like your plan by Monday, October 31st, I say no thank you.
But you see, does our plan include your school?
Right, because you said we can come up with a plan to get, say all towns do agree, and then you show us the plan, and then we decide, well, that really isn't the numbers that we're looking for, or we're not benefiting enough from that. I don't have to go with that, correct? Is that how I
understand? Now, you see, I'm a little confused. You get to have all those arguments. You get to vote yes or no. You get to campaign yay or nay. But first there's got to be a plan, and to form a plan, we need permission to include your time.
To know that I want to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Before that plan is negotiated with the RSU and submitted to the department.
Right, we have to know the committee.
But that does not mean that we have to have everybody included to draft the plan.
Right, we don't have to have everybody included to draft the plan. But we need to, when we go before the RSU 20 board to negotiate.
Right.
Which we need to do before we submit the plan.
Right, you come up with a draft, we get to look at it, and then say that isn't to our liking, and maybe we can negotiate with everyone. But at that point, I can, as a
But we need to do that sooner rather than later. And to point out, just not to point out the obvious, but I know that the option of looking at a K through 8 was brought up briefly, but I've heard from your committee no other options. And that committee...
No, we've looked at it.
I haven't heard at any of these meetings.
And I just wanted to touch base, because I think there was some confusion about when I asked how much is this going to cost. There will be an expense for changing, I'm sure, the letterhead at the superintendent's office, just things like that, which will probably be minimal. My concern is, we've looked at, and it's not opposition to the withdrawal in Searsmont at all, but when we looked, I had the first plan idea, and I said, the best thing for Searsmont kids is a tri-town K through 8. In my opinion, I've had, a couple of kids over the years. But that's not, we looked at that, it wasn't financially viable. For what the 3 tri-towns are contributing. Chuck took the time, called Camden. But again, we looked at the numbers. Chuck called Camden, they told him how much per kid. We looked at the tri-town, and I think I've probably provided the most paperwork out of our committee. I've been to the superintendent's office. I went ahead and got the special education budget. I scheduled the first 3 meetings in Searsmont. I put in a lot of time on this, and I'm not opposing it, but every other angle that we've looked at, we could see numbers, except for going back to old MSAD 34. Again, Chuck called Camden, they said, it's going to cost such and such amount per child. we added up the tri-town taxes and kind of estimated off the size of Ames School, what a K-8 would look like, which if I win Powerball, we're getting it. I will build a K-8 in Searsmont, or Morrill, or tri-town K-8. But, you know, this is, so it's not opposition, this is just the one piece that we just have to say, sure, we'll join, without seeing any financial. First thing Monday morning, I'm gonna go get the budgets from 3 years ago, so that I can at least provide something to the committee.
Valerie,
Yeah.
Chuck said he gave you the last 5 years, so I apologize, but I'm going off of just real-time information. So, and we have the budgets from last year that I passed out y'all. Now, I know that that's last year's.
It wasn't the full budget. It was, you remember that from John McDonald. It's a breakdown of the percentages of the past.
We have the debt service levels that we've passed out to all the communities committees. My question is, why can't you pull out the numbers? Why, if you can, why aren't you?
I did, at our last committee meeting, I pulled this year's budget, and again,
have you thought about pulling out?
I'm a resources manager, I'm not a CPA. So when I took this year's budget, and I took what the 3 towns pay in taxes, and I took what the schools on the other side cost, I showed the old MSAD 56 contributing $500,000 to our pot. But again, I'm not a CPA, and I'm not taking into consideration special education.
Gotcha.
And there's so many different variables. I, as a citizen, I'm not qualified to break that budget down. And I was under the impression after I came here and talked to you on the 18th that you guys were going to do that. It's like the one thing we asked for.
I don't think it's in our statute to create your plan for you. What we're asking though is, would you like to create a plan with us? I haven't heard the answer to that yet, and I'm sorry, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm going to do your work for you unless you join us and we'll do it together. I don't think that's rude. I think that's common sense. I would think that if we were doing a plan together, you would want to be involved. But I don't think I would approach a committee and say, I may or may not join you, but you do the work and do the numbers and then I'll decide. To me, that just seems like not something that I would do. And I'm hearing a lot of agreements in the crowd.
We were all tasked with the same process.
Mission, yeah.
The same mission by our community. So we really all have the same job to do. It's just Belfast, I think, started the process a little bit earlier. And we're asking, before we form our plan, we're asking the other towns, should you be part of this plan? And that's really as simple as it is do you want to be part of our plan? And we don't know what it looks like yet, because we don't know who's in it.
Right, and maybe we're splitting hairs here, because we're not committing to work together. We're committing to study this together and to develop a plan together.
Yeah.
No one is stuck with being in this group at the end of the day. It's really just, we're all going to commit to sit around the same table, form the same plan, and if at the end of the day you don't like that plan, you go back to your town and you find something else that works better.
Or ask for an extension.
Right, which probably is going to involve an extension, but that's fine. A lot of you are thinking of extending anyway.
Deb. I'm sorry, and then Carol, then Deb. So Deb, Carol, Deb.
If this actually goes through in all 6 towns and we sign, and let's say that it passes through the vote, when will this separation of RSU and MSAD 34, ASU, whatever number we're going to be, the 6 towns join together, we all vote, we separate, when does my child go to school without Sears Point?
July 1913. Not yet.
It would be
July 13th.
This current budget year ends June 30th, 2013. So my loose understanding would be the next day would be the first day of the new RSU.
So this is done
September 14th.
Okay.
However, if your town were to seek an extension, Belfast and whoever else, say Morrill does its own thing, everybody else is waiting, then if you don't have your vote until after July, then it wouldn't take place until the next fiscal year after.
So we're part of the tax base of RSU 20.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep. Carol, then Deb, then Alan.
I'm from Searsmont, I'm trying to break this process down very simply to say, the voters voted to explore withdrawal process. We've looked at, in Searsmont, standalone is not economically feasible. We're not at the point of saying, let's compare RSU versus joining the old 34. I'm not seeing anything else to look at as a withdrawal plan to explore. I mean, in my opinion, if you look at 34 versus standalone, that sounds to me like it's a no-brainer, that we're probably, just from a purely money standpoint, better off joining 34. Put that plan together, then do your comparison about stay with RSU versus 34. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a time to get going and act, let's put the 34 plan together so that we can have the time later to do a very in-depth study of RSU 20 versus 34.
Well, the voters would anyway.
Right.
So
I understand.
the comparison.
Hard work people are doing, but I'm kind of wondering, doesn't it seem like maybe this is the time to get going?
Yeah.
You know, just to be clear, I'm only one person on our 4-person committee, and our committee voted to seek an extension because we wanted to do the due diligence. It's not that we're opposed to it. It's not that we're in favor of it. We don't feel we have enough information to decide yet. And I also feel that the citizens in each town are going to take and look to their committees to give them a good recommendation with a lot of facts. And we want to have that information to give them. That's why we feel we need extra time to get that information.
Let me ask you this, though, because, and I appreciate that. So Lincolnville is full. According to Lincolnville, I guess Camden is full, or it appears to be.
Expensive.
Expensive, and so we'll call it full. Your voters voted for you to create a withdrawal plan. And if you ask for a 90-day extension, you may or may not, according to Bruce, be able to have more extensions, but they're going to start asking you, where's your plan, what's going on? May I ask, since you have met, you're the only person here from your committee, what other alternatives do you have other than standing alone, which would mean you would need to negotiate with the RSU? What other options do you have? I think that's where we're confused. That you need options to ponder. What other options are there?
Right now, we need to get the information, financial,
so if we created a plan,
benefit, right.
So that would be helpful.
That would.
So
you want to be, you need to join.
What's that?
You need to join to get that plan then.
Let's do it.
Yeah, well, right, just join.
Right.
I think we're all saying the same thing, but for some reason.
I got more people. I'm sorry. Out what, everybody?
As a school board member, I have 2 main responsibilities: the education of the student and the financial responsibility of the taxpayer. And I would be doing a disservice to my town after they voted to study this, to then say, we're not going to study the options. Because I want to study the financial advantages or disadvantages of going in SAD 34. I want to study the educational advantages, and we are not going to get to that place if the towns, where the citizens who voted to study this, don't allow the study to begin. And so once we get this study together and get these figures, then we can really do an awful lot of judging and debating and finalizing this decision. But if we sit still and delay the process, we're going to affect the children educationally and financially. When the RSU came into this district, it was forced right on us. That's when I got off the school board, because I did not think that you should accept something that's being forced on you. This is being done by the grassroots. To me, the voters have already voted to study the options, and I don't see any reason for dragging our feet to put together a plan that we can take back to those voters and ask them, do you approve of this?
Deb?
Do we have
have an actual wording of how this was written, with the exclusion of Swanville who wrote it
Well,
wrong?
actually, we do. I just found Swanville's, so Butch will either pay me not to read it or...
The petition was written with the intention of the form of 34. It was written right there with the petition.
Well, we'll find it and we'll read it out loud one more time. Here's,
I understand that. That's not my question.
do you favor filing a petition for withdrawal with the Board of Directors of Regional School Unit RSU 20 and with the Commissioner of Education, comma, authorizing the withdrawal committee, this is Belfast's, to expend $50,000 and authorizing the city council to issue notes in the name of the city of Belfast or otherwise pledge the credit of the city of Belfast in an amount not to exceed $50,000 for this purpose. That was Belfast's. I have the others here somewhere.
They should be all the same.
Searsmont was the same with a different number.
Searsmont, yeah. Do you favor filing a petition for withdrawal with the Board of Directors? The same thing.
So why
The numbers are different, the dollar amounts.
But the petition itself, when we asked to enable us to get the vote.
When you're signing.
Right, because I was petitioner, was written and questions were raised via people who were signing it at the store and said, what does this mean? I said, this means that we are going to explore the potential of going back as a party of 6 to the former 34.
Okay.
Exploring only. Where were we wrong in not writing that portion in the statute that people voted on? So I think we have this committee meeting problem right now. Because it's ambiguous as to what the people actually voted on. We all assumed, because we signed the petition, that we were signing a collective of the former 34, but yet, according to the statute or the vote that was filed, now the committee members are correct in saying that this was an exploratory but not associated with, and that's what the problem is.
And I can answer that because I was, coordinator of the petition process. First, a little background. This is all new.
I understand.
And so I'll tell you where that wording came from.
Yep.
I think when Frankfurt, and I'm not sure, this first did their petition, their wording was a little off. It came straight from the commissioner. It was, or the assistant commissioner. Jim, is it Ryan? Right. I called him up and I said, Jim, here's the language Frankfurt used that you approved, okay? So it's all about statute again, and he said, I said, before we're gonna have this printed, is this okay? He said, yeah. He says, that's the way I approve wording. So again, part of it is the newness of the process. We just had wording right from the Assistant Commissioner of Education.
But Common Sense 101, where else would you go if you didn't want, if you were going to separate from RSU 20? Do you really think Swanville had intentions of voting originally to separate from RSU 20?
And that's why everyone went to, and what I said, and I went to 3 meetings of time, was our idea as a withdrawal committee was, let's try SAD 34, and that's what I said constantly. I said it to everyone. When you're signing the petition or you're voting, we're trying to look at an alternative. It's SAD 34 because when we did our research, that was the only viable alternative.
I don't want to pay more than anyone else does.
So anyway, and I didn't sign a petition.
Right.
So I didn't see one.
Yeah.
But I read and voted on this, and as worded in several of the towns, they all favored filing a petition for withdrawal and tasking committees to create the best plan.
Right.
So that's why we're here. The voters voted to do that. The petitioners, as they're signing it, I don't know. But the voters actually voted to form committees to create a withdrawal plan for your community.
And I don't think that the voters
Knew that?
I'm overstepping my thought process, but I can't imagine that a voter standing in a voting booth that voted yes to look at that, to separate from RSU 20, had any other intentions than looking at the former 34.
Oh, I don't disagree, but, that's why you and I get along.
But we need to get there. We're not there yet.
That's why we're both angels.
But to take the time necessary to put, and no offense, the amount of time, energy, and dedication put towards gathering this information, for the apathy of the voter that's out there that took the time for less than 100 people per these small towns that actually came out to vote, and to really think that these people are going to be so interested in these numbers that they're going to come out with 1,200 people in force, you are crazy. Absolutely crazy. Because the people who cared were the people that voted the first time. And it's less than 100, unfortunately, in these small towns.
Unfortunately, in many civic decisions.
I don't know what Belfast was.
I believe we had about 600 votes.
600, Paul, yes.
Same percentage as Searsmont.
Yeah. So percentage was 3 to 1. Yeah, yes. And then guys, at 8:15, we're going to end questions, because as entertaining as it has been, I'd like to get home. And we have some decisions to make.
Just a question for the committee, and maybe for Bruce, is if we all chose to join Belfast, what prevents a town, say Marl, Searsmont, Belmont, a year later, to take the statute for a single town to withdraw? Do your research, take a year, take 6 months to build a plan. If Marl doesn't like the idea of becoming SAD 34, okay, we'll join for now. At a later date, we'll take the Marl town, create a committee, look at the big options, and then once we have the options, we create our plan, we know what we want to do, then we go to we ask to withdraw from SAD 34 or whatever. Once we get our thing back from the state, we've already created our plan, we built it, a day later we send it in, and then we can go off and be a town of Marl K through 12.
Yes, you can.
I mean, you can take 6 months, you can take a month, you can take 2 years, right?
You certainly can.
Is there any reason why we can't do that? Or an individual town?
An individual town could use the same statute and the same process that the 6 towns.
So if the people in the committees don't have enough time right now to do what they think they want to do, there's always time a year later, to do what you want to do.
I don't think there's anybody in this committee, and I'm going to speak for myself, but this is an appropriate point, because here's what I've heard, and then I'll open it up to the Belfast committee only because they're the ones calling the meeting. What I'm kind of hearing, besides indecision and want to see options, is why don't we create a plan that consists of the 6 towns that made up historical SAD 34 and give it to you.
And it's up to each individual town to decide whether your committee wants to be involved in the drafting process.
Right, you show up if you want, and if you don't want, that's fine too. Sometimes you can have too many cooks in the kitchen. But what we need to do, folks, is negotiate with the RSU 20 board.
So saying that, Eric, I would agree with you, except I want a time limit.
I know.
So if we did something like that, where with help from other towns, we could draw up the plan, I would need a time, personally, I would need a time limit for commitment to accept that plan for your town, or we're going to have to draw up a different plan.
I think we need to stick with the same time limit for now.
What's the time limit?
Meaning we get that plan together by October 23rd. And if we find that there is reasonable delay that's necessary for another 3 weeks, a month, or whatever, then we can talk about it then.
The only concern I would have is we need time to negotiate. I'm reading that, and that may be, because it's not dependent upon us to set those time limits.
Let me, and then Susan and Dorothy, I want to hear from you too. If we create a plan for 6 towns that clearly show there are no disadvantages to the towns withdrawing.
Please do, please.
And do your work. It's 6 towns versus 2 towns on the school board. In my mind, if your towns have voted to withdraw, form committees and create a plan, if your committees say, okay, this plan doesn't lose money, and if we can get that sooner rather than later, maybe we'll get that commitment from the other towns. My point is, it's going to be very difficult for the RSU 20 board members in those 6 towns, in my opinion, to not support a withdrawal plan that their citizens have voted on and the committee members have taken the time to make. It is not in their best interests of representing their towns. There comes a point where school board members, and I appreciate wholeheartedly the fact that they represent RSU 20. But their citizens have now voted for them to maybe not. And in negotiations, 6 towns coming forward in negotiations should be rather quick, because the school board ultimately is made up largely of those 6 towns. So in my view, there is power in numbers, in negotiation. It is very hard for me as a member of Belfast to support Belfast being a standalone, because the RSU could simply say it doesn't, no, we're not going to negotiate with you. It doesn't serve the needs of the children in the RSU. But when 6 towns say, yes, let's withdraw, and our citizens voted on it, and here's the plan, let's negotiate, it's going to be very hard for the board to stand in that way. Now, negotiations are negotiations. I will not be a member of the negotiation team. I used to be on the SAD 34 board, and frankly, I know everybody, and I still think that the people the committee recommended make up good. We'll certainly know who can be on the negotiation committee as soon as we know which towns want to be with us. So again, what I'm hearing from people who are not on the committees from these towns tonight are get on with it, and Tanya's saying make sure it's correct too. Get on with it and make sure it's correct. That's everybody's intention. So when will we do it? I don't know. I have no plans.
Can we write a plan in 3 weeks and give it to the towns locally?
Yeah, we can do that.
And those towns have...
But I would ask what is fair and a turnaround time of acceptance of it. And I can't speak for the towns that are on the fence of looking at options. So if we give you a plan in 3 weeks for the SAD 34, old SAD 34 numbers, and they shake out and we create the plan and show it to you, how much turnaround time do you guys need to either be with us or choose to not? Because we need to negotiate.
I think as far as, and I speak only for myself, but I think I speak for the committee, I don't think it would take us a great deal of time at all.
Well, what about the other committees? I don't know, Steve, they haven't even formed a committee, so you probably have no opinion.
I can't speak for the committee because we don't have one.
But it is important to note that if we did form a plan and say Belmont was not part of that plan or chose not to be, and we were successful in negotiating our buildings, then Belmont would still be part of RSU 20. Right? So they would.
Until they create a plan.
Ask to join you.
Right, and so this time frame that we have takes in consideration the school fiscal year end 6/30/13. We would be our new unit as of 7/1/13.
Yeah.
So if we delay, we are potentially delaying a whole year from 7/1/13.
Yeah, I'm not supportive of that.
No, I'm just saying these are all things
Right.
that could happen, you know, when we keep delaying 90 days here, another 90 days and waiting.
If we can come up with a plan in 3 weeks, that puts us at the end of September.
But part of the plan is the negotiation
I know.
process, so how can we put together a plan without first negotiating with our...
When you say negotiation, though, what are we negotiating?
Well,
Buildings, like buildings. I mean, that's...
The major negotiation is property.
And what changes with the negotiation of buildings?
If there were
Based
6
on
right from the beginning,
6
common sense is if there were 6, as there were 6 at the beginning, it should be an easy negotiation. I mean, what you had before you have now. If it's less than 6, then it becomes more complicated.
Bruce, anything to add to that?
Steve's right, exactly correct.
I would add that Belmont has no buildings, correct?
No.
How does
So-
Frankfort factor into negotiating for the RSU 20 buildings now that they are formally...
Frankfort already has negotiated with RSU 20, and Frankfort is not going to run the school.
Right, but how do they still have a position on RSU 20 board?
Yes.
So there's 18 members on the RSU 20 board. So they are one of those votes.
Until the next year.
Belfast is 6 of those votes.
Right.
Like, we need to have majority interest at the
Belfast has
RSU
empty
20
seats.
negotiation process to get the buildings back.
sure.
I think we have 2 empty seats.
So you have 6 seated members plus 2 vacancies, is that right?
4.
Four seated, 2 vacancies.
As a citizen of Swanville, my only concern in the 3-week deadline is the vote, the 25th of September, which would be tied into the 3-week deadline that you are set for negotiations. So we would not be able to, even if we wanted to participate in any of the discussions legally, be able to be part of the negotiations or input, correct?
If your vote is the 25th of September,
Yep.
You would be able to form a committee and send that request to the state. The turnaround time can be up to a month, but it doesn't have to be a month.
Can we make a...
Before they could have their first meeting, you mean?
Right. And so to your point, it'd be hard to be at the table.
Right. So you wouldn't actually technically be able to inclusively negotiate 6 towns, would be my other point, of which Swanville is an indebted town.
The school board members automatically, you only have 1. You need a town member. I'm not sure how many you have.
I know that's not a legal recognized
portion. But are public invited to the meeting and?
Right, but it's like we're creating a plan with assumptions.
Right.
Instead of.
What if Swanville votes not to
That's my question. What if the second vote says no?
Right.
But I think, again, if we come back to the fact that this is all brand new, I think the state is somewhat sympathetic. Remember, it was the other administration that passed this. I think there is the strict law, but I think our committee would love input from Swanville in designing any plan.
Wouldn't you therefore be wiser to put the extension in under the assumption that you would be able to file before that 90 days than being pressured to the...
We can put the extension a week ahead. I don't think that's the extension is the problem. I think the fact that we would love input from Swanville, I speak for myself. Sure. But I think it's logical, and I think, again, time moves on very quickly. Let's make the assumption, especially after you get a positive vote, it's easy to make that assumption, that there is a commitment. And
we can't commit to you until, let's assume that if it's 30 days from the vote, you're talking the 25th of October, which is our...
It won't be 30 days. In fact, I bet if you... after the vote, let's assume it's positive, you send a certified letter with reasons why, and you've got all that stuff.
You probably have the same commitment.
I bet if you called the commissioner up and said, we're under the gun here, maybe we get some extra help with the commissioner, can you just make a quick decision for us?
The DOE, when I talked to someone on the phone, they're really aware of all our towns and what's going on. I was really surprised and impressed. They were telling me stuff that I didn't tell them, and they knew. They have a pretty good idea what's going on, so I was optimistic when I heard that.
You have towns up, Ellsworth. No. But, and also, somebody said something about the other government forcing the consolidation, and then the newer, I think it's in everybody's best interests to make sure the paperwork is good and get out of the way. That's been my impression, is that they're going to make sure the paperwork is good and accurate, and then they're going to get out of the way to let the process happen. That's been my impression.
Gentleman's turnaround wasn't that long.
Right. So, I think it's still doable even if you vote on the 25th, but that gives us 14 days. We might even have a plan to present to you, at the meeting that you can just talk to. So it might even help your vote if you had a plan for withdrawal that included all 6 towns. This lady, then Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I've sort of lost track of how exactly this will all be organized if you move down the track of starting to write a plan. I think any forward progress is fine with me. So I think it looks like we're coming to some decent resolutions, still allowing some folks that want some more information to do what they're doing. But it does seem like, it's my personal view that moving towards the SAD 34 model makes a lot of sense for small communities. But even if it didn't make sense, is there a way to encourage some percentage of the town's withdrawal committees to try to come to some of the plan writing meetings so that there is representation from the outlying towns? I mean, it seems like...
I don't think it would be illegal.
No?
It's a public meeting.
No, that would be the whole idea, as
Yeah,
far as
we're
I'm
not-
concerned.
Well, I mean, you know, really encourage, in other words, it really is suggested that, you know, even if your town is on the fence for one reason or another, some amount of,
I'm committed for Searsmont. I speak
Yeah.
right now for
I'm
that.
committed to Searsmont.
in order to
Yeah.
truly understand it by the, you know, and help make it happen.
Here's my suggestion is we start next Monday. We use Mondays.
I could create, with the statutes, having done the consolidation with Bruce and others, but I could create an agenda next week where we could come up with towns that have voted and with people that, except for Swanville, who could attend. But we could start writing the plan. We can start taking the numbers apart. Susan, you are a CPA, if I'm not mistaken, is that?
I'm not a CPA.
You're not a CPA.
I've worked in the accounting field for
Yes, you have.
many years. I'm not a CPA.
I'm pretty, with plans already established, 5 pages long, and the statutes, it's not going to take a lot of time. We can all do it together. It's just a matter of what's the feel of the committee here?
Yeah. Let's move along.
I just think there needs to be a caveat in the plan that we're assuming we are able to successfully negotiate the buildings from the RSU 20, because that's the big unknown. So you have to, we can make a plan, but we have to make a pretty big assumption there that RSU 20 is going to give our buildings back.
I think we have to, and if correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have to have a deadline of commitment after this plan, so that we can negotiate in good faith.
Well, we need to negotiate. So
to be able to negotiate, we need a
First
commitment.
meeting, Bagley, his name?
Tony Bagley,
Tony
yeah.
Bagley made the point to say that the buildings are owned by RSU 20, not by.
Right, none of the towns own,
Searsmont,
yeah.
Belfast.
None of your communities own your school buildings. You're all well aware of that. The RSU owns them. We need to successfully, and this is from Tony, we need to successfully negotiate with the RSU 20 committee, negotiation committee, I guess minus Steve and Deb. You're on the negotiation committee, and you...
But just for teachers' contracts and whatnot, that's separate.
So the school board we need to approach about creating a withdrawal negotiation committee, which we can do tomorrow. What we can't do is we can't negotiate until we know which towns are committed. And the longer we wait, the less chance of it happening this year, clearly.
I think it would help the process of helping towns to decide about the plan if representatives of the committees or committee members that wanted to attend could be part of drawing up the plan. You know, it's a lot easier to explain things to other people that you've worked on, and they should certainly, even if as observers, should be encouraged when we draw up the plan. They should be in attendance.
Well, that's up to them.
I know, but it's just an invitation.
Tony, I want to ask Tony a question. First, would you be willing to be part of this committee that draws up a plan?
Well, we've already said we would.
Okay. Could you meet on Monday nights?
Well, that's when we do meet, and we've been coming to a lot of these meetings, so I...
That's works then?
So that's 2 yeses.
Okay.
So you help write the plan with us?
Yeah, we would want to.
Yeah.
Swanville will be here. Monday works.
We've just been having them because of soccer and chess club. So, what do you think?
Searsmont's definitely going to be here because it sounds like this is the only option we have to see
Well, I don't know
how they play out. So obviously, I know I've been to every meeting, so I would continue doing that.
So, again, we come back to my concern. If we take 3 weeks, next week being the first week,
Yeah.
And we have a plan done in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
How much turnaround time do they need to make a decision so we can start negotiating?
Searsmont, at least, Bruce said not long at all. Now, I don't know, it sounds like less than a week to me, but probably up to a week.
And not to speak for Bruce, but I think, you know, there's just a little bit of comfort that you can take knowing that this isn't going to cost us an extra, you know, we just want to verify this isn't going to be an extra $3 million or something crazy. That's all, you know, that's all. I think you have that oath to kind of the taxpayers to make sure that this isn't, we're not in opposition. We just want to make sure, you know, Chuck keeps saying it's going to be a wash, it'll be about the same. We just want to see it on paper.
All right, well, we'll create it then for you.
A week?
And I'll be here Monday to help.
Is a 1 week turnaround time, let me just ask this for 1 week turnaround time, which would put us at October 7th, give or take a day.
It's not even a week, it's literally, oh, okay.
Right, you have to have a meeting, you have to schedule a meeting, et cetera, so
let me ask you this, if we create a plan and give it to you by the end of this month, and then pester you daily for up to a week, chances are we'll be able to know your town's commitment to it by the end of that time frame. Morrill is in, Swanville, meanwhile, on the 25th will vote. Bruce?
Yeah, my hunch is if the communities are here involved in writing that plan, there are 11 things that you've got to address. And as you go through those, you're going to know how you feel about those 11 things as you move along. My bet is when you get to item 12, you're going to know whether you can support it or you can't.
Right. So if you're here, it's helpful. The key is negotiation time with RSU. That still gives us 3 weeks to successfully negotiate and a day to mail it in. So we could still hit our plan by the 23rd of October.
And the key to that is to stress, again, we don't have control over the school board, but we hope to, maybe beforehand to say, listen, we're going to be ready, boom.
Yeah, we could certainly make them aware that this is our plan and that our proposed negotiations would begin somewhere in the first week of October.
But in the meantime, how are we handling Belmont and Northport? We're just making them part of the plan?
Belmont doesn't own any buildings. So that's an advantage to us in negotiations, because we won't need to negotiate any buildings in Belmont.
Let me just say this.
Sure.
I think the only way this is going to work is if all 6 communities withdraw. Okay, so you've got to go with that assumption.
Why?
Okay,
Why? We're asking you why.
That's the only way it's going to work.
Why?
Why?
Exactly. That sounds like your opinion, but I don't know why it wouldn't work.
I just feel that's the only way it's going to work.
Okay, then that's your feeling. I like evidence.
Yeah, well, I just feel that's the only way it's going to work. But also, all I wanted to say is the fact that as far as the timeline goes in the vote, from reading the statute, the commissioner actually sets the date when you will vote. And it also said...
When the commissioner sets the date, you will vote what?
Whether to withdraw or not. He sets the date.
This is
a timeline,
Steve. And it also said that he tries to do it on a state election.
Okay.
I can get to the paperwork.
But that's only after, well, that's only after it's been voted on by the public. No, I'm sorry, you're right. That's only after we get, once we send it to him.
Right.
He says a tentative okay, or look at these things.
These points.
So we'll call that a revision. We send the revision back. That's when he says okay, then he sets the date.
That's right.
We certainly can recommend to the commissioner. It doesn't have to be a voting date. We can certainly recommend to the commissioner any day.
I'm just saying according to that he sets the date.
That is true.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true.
But pointing out in our timeline, Steve, we took into account all of the time frame that the commissioner had, and it came up to mid-March.
Okay, I'm just saying, all I know is what it says. We don't have control. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So yes, we have Northport in particular, who's voiced somewhat clearly that they want 90 extra days at least to study. And so the question is,
Do we create a plan without Northport?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think we create a plan with Northport and maybe put in
a contingency,
a contingency extension time to make a plan without Northport.
We're gonna have to have a contingency anyway,
Right.
because nobody is saying that all 6 towns are
Exactly.
going to vote to
So we
withdraw
have a
at the end of the
contingency.
day.
We have a plan and a contingency.
Well, I thought during the last meeting we spoke that we could probably make it work with 5 towns. 4 would be very tight, but below that, it would be a no-go. Is that what we said?
Well, we're looking at the school board too, in particular. Again, if you look at the viability of the current school board and their responsibilities to that school board, if half of the students in the district wouldn't be better served, or half of the towns didn't support, although they have been voted to create a plan, we felt that 5 towns, we thought the school board would be able to negotiate and vote successfully for that to happen. 4 towns, maybe, but we thought it was cutting it kind of tight. We were saying 4 towns because Belmont hadn't voted 2 weeks ago. They've since voted positively. So now we're really down to, in terms of town votes and the need for their committees to create a plan, we're down to Northport. Northport's Deb, who's been vice chair and of the, maybe she currently is school board vice chair, but she was. So Deb's saying that clearly that they feel that they're going to put in for an extension. I'm not sure if their selectmen are aware of that or not. I'm sure we can find out and get more information before the next meeting. I don't think it hurts. I don't think it hurts anybody to create a plan with all towns in it. I don't think that hurts anybody. I think the separation of one town out of that is a pretty simple maneuver if that's where they go. When we do have to have a time frame of early October for town commitments to this at some point. And it sounds like we might have commitment either way, at least from Searsmont. Swanville will have voted. And since they voted successfully first, I feel they probably will vote again. So I think we could positively be looking at a situation where Northport is the only town that hasn't, that committee hasn't decided what to do. We can create a plan, a successful plan, without Northport. I'd hate to do it.
Well, that's a big number, right? I mean, Northport versus, say, I don't know, Belmont or Morrow that choose to jump on board, make a big difference probably, right? On
It is,
numbers.
it is, but you know, the process, I think, is, and I'm glad this is televised, and I'm glad it's going to be on YouTube, because I think it's time, just as it is in every town, for the parents to get involved and put in their 2 cents worth.
I think they are tonight.
I'm saying Northport parents.
Oh, well,
I think we're good.
We haven't had, outside of Deb tonight, I haven't had any communication. I've reached out a couple of times, but I haven't had any direct communication with Northport. I'm not here to say Northport is against it or for it. I'm here to say, clearly Northport, and I think to some extent some of the other communities, thought the vote was to explore. And now some of the communities, including Northport, all of the communities, to the best of my knowledge, are now saying, okay, you were correct in that it was a vote to create the best withdrawal plan and present it to the voters. I don't have to support it, but I've been tasked with creating the best one for my town. Which takes personalities right out of it, because clearly we can just create the best plan. And I think the more towns that are at the table creating the plan positively will get the best results. So that's how I feel.
And I think that we can get to the point of negotiating without having firm commitments from 1 or 2 of the towns.
I think so too.
I think we are going to have a contingent agreement anyway at the end of the day. So why not approach the RSU with what we hope to be the end result of all of this, and if things change by the end of that negotiation process, we can renegotiate. But it makes sense to start out with the ideal and to work towards that, and then step back if we need to.
So one thing Deb Riley did say tonight is they have explored Lincolnville, and that's a no-go. They don't have any other options that I heard of, and I know.
Keep in mind too, this is their 4th time looking at a repeal in maybe the last 15 or 20 years.
Okay.
So and all the other times they were alone, so they had as much time as they wanted.
Yeah.
There was no pressure.
Well, and going under the guidelines, they didn't realize they were tasked to create a plan.
Exactly.
Clearly now they're aware of that in a time frame. So those are steps in the right direction. But they haven't found any other alternative other than joining us in recreating SAD 34. They need to come up with a plan. Choosing to stay in RSU 20 isn't a plan, to the best of my knowledge. You need to create a viable plan. So they will need to create a viable plan. And since we nor they have any other alternatives, I suspect they'll come to the conclusion that joining our plan makes sense to them. However, we'll give them all the time they want. To Kristen's point, we can go up and set up a contingency negotiation committee. I would say at the point of entering negotiations, we would only want towns who are firmly committed to withdrawal to be on the negotiation committee. Yes. And I would like Kristen to run point, if you will, on organizing any of the alternative towns, since she's offered to cover, any legal costs. I think Kristen's a good person to say, all right, your town hasn't committed. I'm just going to use Chuck, and you guys, your town's voted, but you guys haven't come up with it, and here's the plan, and Bruce still has questions, so the committee still says, we're not sure, so I'll let Kristen make the call as the lawyer representing all of us that, you know what, Bruce, probably a good idea you're not on the negotiation committee because you're not sure you want to do it. And that takes, again, any personal nature. She's paid not to be personal, she's a lawyer. Make sure you get that in the paper. But the reality is, we all got a lot of work to do in a short period of time, but to Bruce's point, it's 11 questions. It's 11 questions. It's 5 pages. The state has approved 5-page plans. If we come up with a plan that we like, and I'm really, really empowered by the amount of people that are here tonight, and I'm empowered by Swanville going to have their vote, and you guys being here tonight from Searsmont. If we come up with a plan that we're all like, this could work, I think it might. And then it's off to the races to go out to your communities and answer questions, and we'll go from there. But I'm okay with the plan going forward. Susan? Mm-hmm. Dorothy?
Certainly.
So we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor? All right. So we will create a plan, and we will set ourselves a time frame of completion by the 31st, and we will present it. And if you guys are here that night, it'd be great, because then you can just pick it up. And then turn around a week or less, so we can get this thing in front of the RSU board. Steve?
Could you kind of explain what's going to be in that plan? Just out of curiosity.
Have you seen some of the others?
I mean, what's going to be in that plan? I mean, you won't have already negotiated for buildings and stuff like that.
Steve, in the law, and I think you have a copy, if not, I can get you a copy. There's an 11-point agreement.
All right, I know it.
And I mean, that's what we're going to work on one at a time.
I know, but the negotiating part will not be in there, is that correct?
We will have to assume the successful negotiation of our buildings in our plan.
Yeah.
But each town has to negotiate their own buildings.
Except for Belmont, which has no.
No, yeah, but we have to negotiate our transportation.
Yeah.
But so I'm just saying, whatever plan you come up with, you can't come up with a figure for our transportation or somebody else's town's building. Each town has to negotiate their own buildings.
No. Let's ask the ex-superintendent.
I think you can go as a collective group, Steve. That's what Jim Ryer department indicated, that if the 6 towns wanted to work together, they could.
And Brian okayed that, the current superintendent.
I
have the email.
I was told that each town had to negotiate their own buildings.
Well, your current superintendent said different, and Bruce is saying different. I'm not going to disagree with you, but it's our assumption.
You're breaking new ground here, because no one else is doing this. So.
Yeah.
I mean, just remember at the end of the day, it's an agreement, and it's an agreement between whoever are the parties to that agreement and the RSU. So it makes sense that everybody who's going to be a party to that agreement would negotiate the terms of that agreement with the RSU. So it's not written in the law because the law wasn't anticipating that we would have joint efforts like this. But I think that's the way practically it would have to work.
Well, wouldn't that kind of cause a problem, because just say there's only one person on the committee from each town that goes for negotiating, and they negotiate and they come back with a figure, and the other three say, that's not good enough, you're gonna have to go back. So I mean, it could cause a long process.
It's not, the teams aren't negotiating figures, are they? They negotiate use of the building because the debt service stays the same no matter what we do.
Yeah, it's just the buildings.
Right, but he's saying negotiating a different number. I don't think that's possible. That's locked. The debt service is a lock on the buildings. We're not buying them back. You ask somebody who knows more than I do.
I'm not gonna argue, I'm just stating from what I understand, you have to negotiate the buildings.
Well, that's what we're gonna do.
Have you seen any of the other towns and different RSUs, their agreements to withdraw, or Frankfurt's?
Oh, Frankfurt's, yeah.
You might, I've got an extra copy of Glenburn's if you want to look at it, or take it with you, no?
I'll take it with me, okay.
Oh, please feel free to read it.
Yeah. I'm not saying I'm against this whole RSU, I'm not. I mean, I just want to make sure we do it right, see the figures, and you know, do what people want to do.
Well, I know you're not saying that, but you did vote at the Belmont meeting not to withdraw. So clearly you don't support it. It was at the meeting.
Nobody saw how I voted.
Okay, I heard you voted against it at the meeting, and you just told me you did.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
It was a referendum, right, in Belmont?
Oh, the referendum?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Right, so you voted against it, but you're not against it?
I'm not against it.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Any other questions or thoughts, Deb?
Do you have a copy of the 11-point agreement, or where can I find that?
We do, I don't know if I have it in here, I can give it to you.
It's on the DOE department?
Yeah.
It's on the website.
We also have debt service levels, we have the Starks withdrawal, I have student populations, as does, yeah, some of the committees. Any other thoughts, questions? Val, Alexa?
Just recap,
Susan.
we're going to meet Monday, 1 week from tonight. We're going to begin to design a plan that includes all 6 towns, representatives from Searsmont, Morrill, Swanville, plan to be here.
Yeah.
Everyone's invited from
Northport will reach out, although Deb was here, we'll certainly reach out and let them know what our plans are. And they're certainly welcome.
So the 17th at 6:30 here?
Yep. This building on Monday nights at 6:30 is open for us as long as, or at least through October 23rd. That was the direction of the city manager.
We could explore the idea of meeting elsewhere.
We could.
You know, we could go one in each town from here till it's settled, if that
Let's start here next week.
would make sense, but definitely start here.
Bruce?
Is it fair to assume you're going to start with the item number 1 of the 11 and work down through the list?
I would say.
Why not?
Yeah, and probably what I'm thinking what we'll end up doing, because we don't have much time, is to have some subcommittees or some study groups for each of the issues, if there are things that still need to be looked at, figures to be gotten, things like that. So if you look through those points and there's something that you have in your own town as a particular interest, you know, feel free to bring that to the next meeting and try to get on a study.
And we have other rooms if the subcommittees want to, you know, because this is one big room. So we have at least 3 rooms in this building that we have access to. All good? Huh?
Yeah.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yay.
Thank you all very much for coming. See you next week.